Welcome to the Once and Future Authors Podcast. I'm Stephanie, and I'm so delighted to be joined today by author Jason Gardner. Jason is actually joining me from Paris, and his book, A Flower in the Mouth, The Beauty and Burden of Carnaval in Pernambuco, Brazil, is just a gorgeous, gorgeous book. For those of you who are listening, well, you're just going to have to head over to his website at jasongardner.net and see some of the pictures. If you're seeing us today, you're going to get a little glance, but jasongardner.net is where you can find Jason and his pictures of Carnival and a million other things, because wow, I've been looking at those pictures of France and Morocco as well. So welcome, Jason. Thanks for
Thank
joining.
you, Stephanie. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Oh, I love your website, especially right now that we're kind of locked down. It's like being on vacation. And I said to you that I've been to Morocco, thankfully, right before pandemic. And your pictures, the ones that you posted there of Morocco, are I felt like the pictures I wish I had taken.
Yeah,
Right?
especially the past one that you commented on. Yeah, separately from this book project that we're going to discuss, in the last year, I've done this thing called Armchair Traveler series, which is on my site, which me going in my archive of 15 plus years of travel photography and pulling out certain images to help to brighten people's feeds and these things, and posting once every couple days or so. And it's been a really great response to be able to connect with people that way, to show people different places, and to broaden my reach a little bit with the audience.
Where can we find that?
It's on my site, jasongardner.net,
Oh, we
and there's
can
a
go right.
section called Armchair Traveler. Yeah,
Fantastic. Okay,
and some
Jason
of that's on my
Gardner.
Instagram as well.
Okay, and your Instagram handle is?
It's at Visual Anthropology One, the number one.
Fantastic. Okay, we need to spicing up our feeds, that's for sure. And until we can go someplace ourselves, but as much as I love to travel, my photographs don't look like yours. I take them with an iPhone. So, how did you get involved in photography in the first place before we even get to the book?
Oh, well, it came from traveling actually. In my mid 20s, I got tired of the sort of business corporate grind. I'd had a job for a few years, and a lot of people call it the quarter life crisis, in your mid 20s. And I started backpacking around the world, and I was going to go for 3 months or 6 months. I ended up being gone for 2 years straight, working and traveling throughout. And this is Middle East, Southeast Asia, India, Indonesia, Australia, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, these sort of places. When I came back, besides trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, I started looking at the photos that I shot with my little point and shoot film camera. This is in the mid 90s. And I'd always had a dream of being a photographer, but not knowing what that meant. But seeing the work, I did a little exhibit, a pop-up exhibit before there were pop-ups, and sold some work, was encouraged. And I said, well, might as well do what you love, and it doesn't feel like work.
Oh my gosh, I love that story. You just got a whole lot of people to turn off the podcast and just make reservations. They're just out of here. And wait, what did you call the midlife crisis in your 20s? I didn't know about
A quarter life crisis.
a quarter life crisis.
Yeah.
Okay. A
Yeah.
whole lot of people just said, I didn't know I was allowed to have that. I missed it. Is it too late?
It's not too late.
It's not
It's
too
not too
late,
late.
folks.
But basically, from a fundamental level, I come back from doing all sorts of experiences, largely backpacking and on the cheap, and by myself, and these things. And I thought to myself, when I returned back to New York, what do you want? Like, what do you want to do? Seriously, what do you want to do? And I kept on coming back to photography. Like, that's always been something that I've had a passion for. And so I thought, well, if any time to do it, it's now. And so I'm pretty much self-taught in terms of the technical compositional aspects of that, but I'm also self-taught in how to run a business and to be a photographer. That's two separate things,
oh,
which is a whole other conversation.
a whole other conversation. And then how to be an author, a published author is you're a multifaceted person.
Yeah. Well, in order for me to think, and I say this to a lot of potential authors, be they photographic or regular, you think of your book as, almost like a product. It's your personality, but it's also who's it going to speak to, where's your audience live, and so I had to think about that when I was raising the funds for my book before I published it.
I am so excited that you said that because you and I are speaking to the same choir, and I am constantly mentioning that the thinking about the audience should come before we write the book.
Right. Right. In my case, it came more like I shot it. I wanted it to be a book, and then I had to think about the audience who would resonate with supporting the book
Right,
as it
right.
was. So I kind of was halfway in between.
Exactly. Well, tell me about Carnaval. How did you get interested in Carnaval and the book, you know, little
Right. So this book, A Flower in the Mouth, basically is a project that I photographed over 5 different visits to this one area in Brazil. Recife is the city in Pernambuco in the States in northeast Brazil. And it's well known within Brazil, but not very well known outside as being a place that's um, not the easiest, not the most touristic, not the safest place in the world by far. And because of that, or despite of it, it retained a lot of its authenticity. And I hate using that word, but for lack of a better word, in terms of its culture and folklore. And that's reflected in the carnival. So let's go up a high level. You know, what is carnival? Like most people know it as like maybe Mardi Gras in New Orleans or Carnival in Rio. Well, the festival of carnival is actually pre-Christian, it's pagan, right? So it's this idea of the change of the seasons, of renewing, of renewing things, of kind of like the winter turning to spring, and there's many other things tied to it, but in a sense, the power of putting on a mask, of transforming yourself, of becoming someone else, of going outside of yourself, of your normal routine, that's a very powerful thing. And it's very strong in Brazil because Carnival originated in Europe, and in Brazil, it was European colonialism combined with the slave trade to mix this sort of cauldron of culture to make both African influences and European influences. And
wow.
historically, the in Carnival, the Africans, the slaves, were not permitted to practice their religion. And so during Carnival, they were able to. It's called syncretism. They're able to do parallel to say, oh no, no, we're celebrating, you know, this Christian God, right? This Christian deity, this Christian, you know, spirit or saint, but it was actually one of their own. And so that's how it flourished in that way. Recife and Pernambuco is really well known for being super authentic in terms of the carnival and the music and the culture that supported it. So um, why this has been relevant, you know, for me, after shooting it and after producing a book, it's helped me to have a lot of exhibits. I've presented this in Lincoln Center, New York, in a solo exhibit right before one of the groups that I photographed performed. I presented this work in New Orleans Jazz Fest, in 2 music festivals, both in Toronto and an art festival, and at many, many exhibits all around the world, including New York, Geneva, Paris, of course, and recently Belgrade, Serbia, of all places. So there's definitely an interest. And the reason why I ended up going to this place in Brazil, because when I was starting my photography career, and I was shooting a lot of musicians, and music was my first passion. So I thought, well, I'm going to photograph some musicians here in New York. And I started with independent musicians, and I got bigger ones. I shot Bob Dylan and Isaac Hayes and all these people. And as I started getting better and better at that and doing magazine covers and all these things, art directors and people who are critical in terms of the photography world, curators, would say, we want to see a personal work. We want to see you do a project of your own. And I thought for me, it was, well, music. I love to travel. I love culture. Everyone said, you got to go to Brazil. But I didn't want to go to Brazil and not know anything. So I started doing a lot of research, and I started talking at first to anyone who would talk to me about Brazil, had been there, Brazilian expats, that sort of thing. And I also started talking with ethnographers who studied music in Brazil. And they said, you could go to Rio, which is really well known. You go to Bahia, which is in the northeast, Salvador de Bahia, which is also well known. You could do a project there, but consider Recife. Like multiple ethnographers told me to look about Recife because of those factors that I said, that it was like a little bit less known and still pretty, you know, a gem. And so because of that, and because it was a small scene, smaller, but still very vibrant, they had connected me with 5 or 6 people before I even got there. And I was able to hit the ground running. And I went, the first one was 2004, off season, October. And I photographed 2 groups. I followed 2 traditional music groups as they practiced, as they dressed, as they did portraits of them, the whole thing. At the end of that, they said, "Oh, this is all great and fine, but you have to come back for Carnival because that's when most of the stuff happens." And so I went back a few months later for the Carnival season, and I shot like crazy for some weeks, and I went deeper and deeper and deeper, and I came back and I realized I'd only scratched the surface. It was that wide of a culture. And what I mean by that, just to go down one level of detail, it's not like one type of music that dominates. There's 6 or 8 types with different ethnographic groups that all happen at the same time during Carnival. There's 50, 80, 100 groups of musicians, of costumes, and there's all these separate, similar to the Rio Samba Club, the Samba schools, excuse me. There were all these schools of called blocos, Blocos, that kind of every year had their traditions specific to that street, to that neighborhood, to that region. So it was fascinating and really, really intense. So I decided to keep returning to that place, and to go kind of like peeling away the layers of each time I went. And I did that by returning and actually bringing photos. So to some extent, people are always asking me, how do you keep the access? How do you keep the relationship with the group? Well, even back then, I would bring prints, and some of them had done photos of themselves because during Carnival they're too busy, and cell phones were not ubiquitous then. So I would give it, and they would love it for their family. Also, I would bring some of my work, and some people who had kind of been in the fringe of my contact, they said, "Oh, I like to see what you've been photographing, but you're missing something. Come next weekend, I'm going to show you." And they would take me deep in, they would take me to start to see ceremonies and rituals and practices that most people had never seen before. So it's very private. So uh, that to me made a more rich project than just the streets, the public face of Carnival. It's really the behind the scenes of an authentic Carnival. So to some extent, like, why would you be interested in the book? On one level, you could be able to see an area of the world that you may not be able to get to and travel virtually in a sense. But also, it's seeing a festival that is super powerful for them. I mean, everyone thinks Mardi Gras in New Orleans, it happens during one day, Fat Tuesday, the Tuesday before Lent, right? But in New Orleans, and also much more in Brazil, Mardi Gras happens for months. It starts the beginning of January, Three Kings, January 6th. And so usually goes for a good 6 to 8 weeks. Every weekend, sometimes Wednesday, Thursday, Friday night, that kind of thing. But Carnival happens for the whole year, really. They're preparing, they're sewing, they're practicing. It's really a way of life. It's core to their existence, to their identity.
Wow, I had no idea about the whole well, how you got involved being actually through your love of music.
Right. It started there. Yeah.
That's just phenomenal. Now I'm wondering and wishing, is there like a companion CD to the book so I can?
Are you really asking that? Look in the back,
I'm looking at the back.
the back cover. See that card there? So there's a companion. Was that not a trick question? Was that a layup? Yeah. So what I did was I created with some of the musicians that I worked with in this book.
Look at that.
It disappears because of the zoom. Yeah. There's an audio companion of, I believe, 9 tracks that you can download. So music from the region.
Oh,
And if the download doesn't work when you purchase it, you can email me or contact me, and I will send you the code to download. Because there's a little weird expiration thing with the card. It sometimes works, sometimes
oh
doesn't.
my gosh.
But my concept there was to do a little bit of a multimedia experience to be able to have, so you can listen to some of the groups while you look at the book.
Fantastic. Yes, because now it's a visual experience, and now knowing that your inspiration to even go to the region
Yep.
was for the
And
music.
and one other note about the book itself. It's not a traditional photography book, I would say. It's mostly photographs, but it's a lot of writing as well. And I did that on purpose because if you when I tried just doing a book of photographs, it was powerful, but people kept on asking me, what does that mean? And what's the significance of this? And what they want to know the backstory, the context. So for me, I needed to actually understand what the thing I was photographing and how it related to everything else. So in doing that sort of journalistic work, I created what I like to think of as like mini magazine articles per chapter that kind of dug deep without taking away in design from the photographs to show. So if you want to read about it, you can, but it doesn't stop you from just leafing through the book.
Right.
And people have said that resonates with them in terms of they can get a feel for the images and then go deeper and read about what they want.
Oh, that's fabulous because just hearing you speak about the region and what Carnival really means to them changes everything. To me, from wow, here's some pretty pictures of the parade. That's
Correct.
that's
Right.
that's my impression at first is, oh, let's look at some really gorgeous pictures of the parade. And now realizing, oh no, 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 we're actually delving deep into an entire culture.
Yeah, and that's a common thing, especially when Brazilian carnivals, basically, let's say Rio is marketed as the Sambodrome, which is this gorgeous show, but it's really a show. And Brazilians derogatorily call it like Hollywood. It's very cosmetic and superficial. It's a beautiful show, but it doesn't get even past the surface of what does this mean and how is this important to me and all these things. That's the opposite. You'll see very few, if none, no bikinis, no feathers. It's really a lot of traditional characters. And this book is a combination of the city carnival and also the country carnival, which is like one level even deeper. That's harder to see, and it's about half and half of that.
Right. It's very funny that you said that about the bikinis and the feathers because I firmly admit that when your book arrived, I thumbed through and I said, "This doesn't look like Carnival," because
That's my whole point. That
I was expecting bikinis and feathers.
right. That this is not that. That's the farthest thing from that. In fact, the other theme is that carnival is not just a party. It's a way of life. It's an identity. It's core to their existence. Similar to music is. Brazil, you can't walk 50 meters without hearing music. Be it from the cafe or from a bar or whatever, or people's homes. And carnival is the same.
Wow. Oh,
Yeah.
that was such a great deep dive because, as I said, definitely not the Carnival I expected when I thumbed through. And you're absolutely right. Our impression of what Carnival means is a parade that happens on Fat Tuesday, and then it's over.
Well, also, a lot of the music and musicians, for example, let's talk about the cover for a second, right?
Mhm.
First of all, this is a man, so it's cross-dressing
Okay.
for sure. Second of all, he's in a group that's called Maracatu, which is African influenced drumming, along with a cortege, a parade of kings and queens and princes and the court, right?
Right.
So the first of all, the drumming, uh, it's very deep, it's very sonic, and it's basically often the groups are from the favelas, right? They're the poorest of the poor. And in this case, during Carnival, everything becomes inverted. So, like the poorest of the poor dress up in their finery and they are kings and queens for 4 days. But also, it allows them to say, this is us, this is our identity, this is what we've put our energy into learning these songs and connecting with our African roots. And the third thing is that it's actually a local competition. So, it's in a sense their scholarship, their way out. So if the local group plays and they compete in Carnival and they get selected for the best prize during Carnival, either being the look or the musical uh, togetherness or the whole package, then throughout the next year, they're hired by the local prefecture or the mayor or the state to do functions and dinners, and they make money.
Wow.
So there's more on the line than just pure fun.
Right, right. Oh, very interesting. They really trusted you to let you dive deep like that.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it was a combination of diving deep and sharing the photos with them and circling back to the ethnographers who I started to collaborate with and getting their take on that. And then circling back with some of the other people who were kind of the intermediaries, maybe they're middle class between the root group and then myself. And so it's a kind of conversation and collaboration. Like, what does it mean? What does it mean to you? And how do I, I'm really the bridge of this culture. Yeah.
Now, how many trips in all did you make down there for this book?
Five total, four carnivals.
Oh
There's
my.
the first one off season, then four carnivals. Yeah. And it was between 2004 2010, which is significant because so the this book, I was lucky in selecting Brazil because during that time, on the world stage, Brazil was increasing massively. You had the World Cup, and you had the Olympics, and you had the economic powerhouse.
Mm,
It's changed a bit then. We're not going to get into that, but because all that stuff was happening, it made it very relevant for me to publish the book because there's a lot more attention being paid to Brazil as a culture.
right, right. So what was suggested to you as we'd like to see a personal project became a 6-year journey.
Yeah, well, more like obsession. Yeah.
So for all those people out there who think that a personal project is just going to take a couple of months, we just want to tell you, get your passports ready.
Yeah. But it's certainly, as I mentioned before, I got some great exhibits out of it and great artist talks out of it, as well as being seen as someone who's creating a project out of nothing. It certainly helps a lot on multiple levels, both my assignment work and it's influencing my next project, which is, in fact, I'm going to be doing Carnival around the world, which we'll talk about at the end, I think. Yeah, which I'm
Fantastic,
shooting now.
fantastic. Well, tell me a little bit about, 5 trips down there. You've now amassed, I guess, thousands of pictures. How does that get to this? Tell me a little
Right.
bit about that.
So how do I organize? So the question is, how do I organize all of this content, photos, and to some extent text, and these things? How do I organize it into a more cohesive project, right? Well, let's start, like many authors, with the table of contents. So the next page, yeah, contents. Let's see if I can do it. So I split it into 3 chapters in a sense. Carnival, culture, and ceremony, right? And the way I see it is if you think about a pyramid, right? The base is the carnival, right? That's the thing that maybe it's the reverse, maybe it's an inverted pyramid. Yeah. The most public is the carnival. That's on the street, that's the parade that you mentioned. The
Right.
culture is like the groups that I photograph, their practices, all the different groups that make up the culture. And then ceremony, where the very private, usually an hour walk in the favela in an unmarked house, 8-hour ceremony, which is linked to carnival because people often need the ceremony to be ready to kind of go out in a real way. But the religious aspect of the carnival. Yeah.
Wow.
So the way I structured the book was they would first enter into kind of in a sense how I saw it. I first saw the very public carnival, and then I went to some practices. Then I got to understand how the group was, and then after returning a few times, I started getting invited to the more private ceremonies. So that's kind of how the sort of arrow of the book, the sort of timeline of the book goes for me. And then what I did was I structured it. I don't know what I want to show. Some of the book is more just straight photos, right? And some of the book, as I mentioned, is more like, well, some of the book has some drop quotes.
Okay.
So, like to some extent, this drop quote here, and it's in English and Portuguese,
Okay.
was about, why do you do this carnival? Why do you spend all this time and money and energy on it? And to some extent, they said, well, it's to look beautiful, to be beautiful, but also to show who we are, and we've always done it. And then the third level was kind of doing like mini magazine article pieces, little articles, so someone could uh, dig deep into it, but the photos are still the top thing. Then separately, let's see if I can quickly find it. Separately, what I did was I did mini fuller stories within, right? And that's a slightly different color treatment. That's like,
Oh,
I
yes.
might tell, it's off blue
Mhm.
and it's a little bit longer of a piece
Okay.
and usually about one story or one group. So that's kind of the sort of how I blueprinted the book. And separately for writers and book producers, I had to deal with three different type fonts, right? There's the regular text, there's the drop quote, and then I need to treat the translations, there's English and Portuguese. I wanted to visually show that the English was different from the Portuguese. So it was pretty obvious that you could, if you were a native English or Portuguese speaker, you could read one flow the whole time. And that all I worked out with my designer. I'm not a designer. I had someone professionally work with me and all these things.
Fantastic.
So I
That
hope that
leads me to
helped.
a question. Do you speak Portuguese?
I do. I do. Not fluently, but good enough to get around.
Did you before you went to Brazil?
No, I studied a little bit to get my foot to get my feet wet, but it was only after the third or fourth visit really where I could actually get around decently. Before it was a lot of like broken sentences and and I had a couple of people who spoke English who helped me, but it was tricky. Yeah.
Wow. What a journey. This is just such an amazing journey, and I love the way you divvied it up and gave thought. This is so important for people to realize. Gave thought to things like wanting people to have flow through the whole book in English or Portuguese,
Yeah.
wanting people to dive deeper and having the text but not have it take away from the photographs. And so those people who wanted to just look, they can look, and those people who wanted more of a lesson in it can dive deep.
Yeah.
That's
And
important.
again, it's not a traditional straight photography book, which is usually like there's an introduction and then there's photos and then there's captions at the end. I kind of did it differently.
Yeah.
And some of it came from the evolution of thinking about it a lot and showing it to people and them saying, well, these are great photos, but what does it mean? And I need to know more context. And then some of it was me strongly feeling like I wanted to do the right thing by this story, and to showing that there's a lot of significance behind it. It's not just a drunken party. It's not just looking great costumes. Yeah, it's totally separate.
Oh, I'm so glad that you did, because you're absolutely right. My entire perception of it has changed. Seeing the book, hearing you speak about it, my vision of it is, wow, not feathers and bikinis.
Yeah.
That's
Plus, also my experience over many different visits was like almost like a spiral. So I'd start with one group, like the Monaco 2 group is what I started with. But by the third trip, I was kind of circling back then, but I was going deeper within the culture and experiencing other things. And as I kept on returning, some places I chose to shoot further, and some places I broadened out where I was like, ooh, I've heard of that aspect of the culture, but I've never photographed it. Now, my third time, someone knows someone who can get me there. So I'm going to go there. And
very
then also because during Carnival, it's super intense. It's 4 days of insanity of day and night. I mean, literally, they don't stop. You can't cover the whole thing in one time anyway. It's just you can't because things happen simultaneously.
yes,
So, the second trip, the third trip, I would be like, oh, yeah, I didn't get a chance to go there. So now I'm going to go there.
amazing. So, what is next on the docket for you?
Well, next on the docket is so the years that I couldn't go to Brazil, because I couldn't go to Brazil every year, even in this project, I started when I was in New York, going to places like Trinidad and Tobago, New Orleans, and also the countryside of Louisiana. They have a totally separate Cajun carnival, which is nothing like Bourbon Street. And then I went to Dominican Republic and these places. When I moved to Europe in 2016, I started exploring the European carnival, which includes both Western and Eastern Europe. Currently, it's Spain, Bulgaria, France, Slovenia. That's just Europe off the top of my head. There's a lot of Austria. I did a trip to West Africa because Africa has carnival too. these kind of things. And now about it around 15 different areas, 15 different carnivals. So the next book will probably be Carnival Around the World.
Wow. I've heard of Carnival in Venice. I hadn't heard
Right.
of those other places in Europe.
I won't go to Venice for Carnival. The reason why is because the carnivals that I focus on are the more ethnographic. Usually they're like a small village in the mountains. The Carnival in Venice, while it is beautiful visually, it's primarily for tourists, and you have to pay a lot to get a costume. There's very few locals, and I shouldn't say I haven't experienced it directly, but as I understand it, it's lost some of its original meaning.
Gotcha.
For
Gotcha.
for and that's fine. It's just not what I choose to cover. It
Right.
doesn't fit with the rest of the
It
work.
doesn't fit with the rest of what you're looking at. And that's why this is so different, because it's not Rio. It's, it's not the picture of Carnival. It's not the public, you know, view of what we think it is, that giant spectacle, which
Yeah,
I guess Venice is the Rio of Europe, shall we say, when it comes to Carnival, then, as far as
to
spectacle.
some extent. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, they did a great job to publicize the concept of carnival globally. For many, 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 many years.
Right.
But the I think on a very deep level, for me, the photos of carnival and the act of carnival itself, it's akin to the analog experience, meaning that in today's digital world, now there's a resurgence of people wanting to have analog film and vinyl and read actual books, right? um, the carnival experience, there's more of a popularity. Actually, it's helped by Instagram. It's easy for people to see what it is, but among young people there's a revitalization, there's a return to their roots. And to some extent during carnival you can enter into this other world,
Mhm.
explore your ancestors from 1,000 years ago, what that felt like. And you don't need to live stream it because you'll never be able to necessarily convey that on digital platform what it feels like, the grittiness, the analog feel.
How on earth did you meet people? Because you're not talking about going to Carnival like I would go and I'd get a hotel reservation, and you're talking about real
Deep,
Carnival,
deep, way deep in there.
deep,
Yeah.
and even to know which of these places to go to, which places are, how does that all come about? That's just amazing to me.
A lot of it is research and cross referencing what people are saying. The first year or two in Europe, it was tricky because I didn't know much, but I kind of started with one local carnival here in France.
Mhm.
And as I got to be known for the guy who shoots carnival in Europe, people started recommending me places. But the breakthrough was, again, I collaborated with those who know carnival. Although my project is different in that I've never seen a photographer who shot multiple carnival. I've seen a lot of photographic projects about carnival, but I've never seen one about multiple ones around the world. Um, there's one guy who does it. I'm not going to go into it, but he does it in a very different way. He does composed portraits, and he goes off season. I go actually during the festival and photograph them in situ in the environment.
Oh my gosh. I'm thinking that this next book is going to be a really, really fat book.
It could be. Let's see. Let's see.
I mean, if this is one carnival in one location,
Right.
now you just rattled off, a half a dozen at the very least.
Right, right. And in terms of titles and themes, A Flower in the Mouth, I call it the beauty and the burden because it's not just a beautiful thing. It's a burden not being negative, but just being an obligation, being this thing that they kind of work on all year, and it's work.
That is.
Um, and I call it right now the title, the working title of the Carnival project is Return to Carnival, which is kind of referencing a little bit of that returning to your roots.
Right.
And so what I saw a lot in Europe was that, yeah, the carnival, the traditional, super traditional, almost pagan still carnival happens in a little mountain village in Bulgaria, and modern people from Sofia would drive back to their home village for the carnival to kind of to put on the mask and then kind of lose themselves. And that I found fascinating too, that kind of revalorization of these old ways.
Jason, what happened to Carnival these past 2 years?
This year it didn't happen that much.
Right.
This past year, February of this year. February, Jan and Feb of 2020, I photographed 8 carnivals, luckily. So that gave me a lot of content right before lockdown. Because
Wow.
it only happened in March, lockdown last year. So yeah, and this year there were very few. There were a little local ones that kind of, but I didn't really do anything. I kind of wanted to stay safe.
Yes.
But yeah, that's the other factor is number one. Well, globally, the significance of wearing a mask has changed dramatically, obviously, right? And two, we're not sure in what form this culture will come back. Will it come back to the exact same? Maybe not. So this work that I'm going to be working on, editing and putting together may be a sort of document of a previous time.
Oh my gosh. You're right. And I'm sure when you were shooting it, you never thought that in a million years.
No, no, I didn't forecast that.
Well, who among us could have forecast this? This is
Yeah,
beyond the beyond. Well, I am so thrilled that you joined me today. I'm
thank you so much. It was
grateful
great.
to do that. Let me remind our uh, viewers and listeners where they can find more because, well, I'm diving in deep. For one thing, I'm going to be following you on Instagram when this is over. JasonGardner.net is where you can find his book, A Flower in the Mouth, but also see some pictures of what he's working on today and going forward into his new book about Carnival around the world. Also, sign up there and follow him on Instagram so you can get first notice of what's going on and get the book. But you
Yep,
definitely want to grab A Flower in the Mouth, not just because the book is amazingly beautiful, which it is, but so informative. I mean, I learned more in the past half hour than I knew in my entire life about Carnival. And
fantastic.
also the music. That is just the nice bonus in the back is that you can just put yourself right there on the street and see it and hear it and any time of the year, but we're locked down. So you want to see and hear Carnival because you weren't able to do so already.
Yep, and just a reminder, the Instagram handle is at Visual Anthropology One, the number one, and my website's jasongardner.net, in which I do have an online store to sell both books and some prints if you want to decorate your home. Uh, I believe the book is being sold on a few online sites as well, but maybe better to go through my
Yeah,
site.
go to jasongardner.net. Jason, thank you. I can't thank you enough for being here today and introducing us to not just a gorgeous book, but a whole cultural way of life that we really would have known about.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Stephanie. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.